Hey everyone, so today I want to talk about Neptune square or opposite the midheaven in your natal chart. Now, I think all Neptune midheaven aspects are similar in a lot of ways, both in the positives that they can give a person or provide a person, and the negatives, the challenges that come with having Neptune in any aspect to your midheaven, even the easy aspects. I think there's a lot of similarities, and some of the things that I say about Neptune square opposite your midheaven could also apply to you if you have the conjunction, the sextile, the trine, the inconjunction especially. But I think with the sextile and trine, the challenges might not be as bad, like it might be easier to manage, obviously. And the conjunction, there's not going to be as much need for integration as there is with the hard aspects, like the square, the opposition, and the inconjunction. But I'm going to talk about the square and the opposition in this video. That's what I want to focus on. So I'm going to start with the square. Now, the positives with the square is that this can give you a lot of creative abilities and a unique talent, which is the ability to adopt any kind of public persona that allows you to play the role that any sort of career or public position requires. Now, some might say, oh, that's not really a talent. No, that can be a talent. Because, okay, with the square, if Neptune falls, I use the equal house systems, by the way. So the midheaven, when you use the equal or even whole house systems, the midheaven isn't always going to fall in the 10th house, and that's okay. You kind of just analyze it on its own as its own point, because that's really what it is. It's not a house, and this is one of the reasons why I don't think the Placidus house system is as accurate. There's a lot of reasons, but I'm not going to get into that now. But if you just look at it as like a point that's what you're going towards, it is towards like the upper half of the chart. The 10th house kind of just shows the contents of what that end point might be or might look like. But so, the 10th house and the midheaven do have similarities. Now, if Neptune making a square to the midheaven falls towards the ascendant, so in the first house, maybe depending on the house system that you use, maybe even like in the second, the 12th, if the midheaven point falls into the 9th, if you're using the equal house system or something like that. So if it just falls towards the west side of the chart, looking at it from like the ascendant, then it's going to indicate that you can physically look the part that the midheaven requires. Like you can kind of, like your ability to play the role involves your physical appearance. Like you can kind of physically make yourself that role. Now, if it falls on the opposite end with the 7th house, the descendant, then it's going to be more so about how other people perceive you as that role. So it's almost more of a projection on you from other people. Now, this can also happen if it's in the first house, but in the first house, it's going to involve more of your persona, your immediate personality, what you project to other people. So it's going to kind of come from you first before it comes from other people. In the 7th, it's the opposite. It comes from other people first, and then you kind of mold yourself into that, what you think or what people project onto you. So it's easy for others, when it's on the 7th house end, it's easy for others to see you as easily fitting into any kind of public role, if that makes sense. So this is kind of like the square to the midheaven is a chameleon placement, just like the conjunction is, but the square has its unique challenges in that it's a very sensitive placement. And a lot of what you want to do for people is provide some kind of healing, but it's hard to put forth solid effort to be able to provide that in a tangible way because it's square to it. So squares require adjustment. They require some kind of negotiation between whatever planets or points are in square to each other. So I think one of the biggest challenges with the square is that it can be a confusing placement for the individual because they can be confused by public expectations of them and what they think they should be. If it's in your first, this is going to be especially true for you regarding what you think you should be and how you think you should play this public role. Now, in the seventh, it's going to be more being confused about what others think you should be. So on both ends, these expectations, whether of yourself on the first house end or of others on the seventh house end, neither of them, regardless of what they're doing or what those expectations are, neither of them might actually have anything to do with what you're actually supposed to be. So that's where it gets confusing, is that what you're supposed to be and what you think you should be or what others think you should be becomes confusing. So it can create this personality that's kind of wishy-washy or indecisive about what your future goals are, what you should be, what you want to be. So you can become kind of passive when it comes to taking opportunities that come to you or working towards something in a real way, like putting forth actual disciplined work towards that goal. And in an extremely shallow and negative way that this can go, like you can end up being more about appearances than anything else, like just kind of putting on a show. Not like a show like being an actress or an actor or something, but like just looking more like the actual role than doing the real work that role requires. And it could be like with any kind of social position. So in another negative sense, like this can be a kind of lazy placement. Like I'm not trying to be mean or anything. It's just Neptune is about things that are easy. It's not things that Neptune doesn't really like to put in a lot of effort. So you can even have unrealistic ideas about your future or about the future in general, and then can end up being disappointed when things don't really materialize for you, but maybe it's because you haven't put in the actual work towards that. Because Neptune also avoids things, so you can be kind of avoidant of taking responsibility for your own progress, your own success. So when Neptune is square the midheaven, the point is to integrate Neptune into the midheaven in a useful way. So it's using that chameleon-like persona to your advantage, not to play the role, but not because you're gonna lie to people, but it's almost like faking it till you make it. It's like you're playing the role so well that eventually it becomes a part of you. And it's not that you change yourself, it's that you're putting in the work to actually become that. Like utilizing yourself, first house, and what other people might need from you, seventh house, to integrate that into actual real work and progress with the midheaven. So a lot of times this is going to involve something creative. Like this is a really good placement for people who are in like acting or part of like the film industry, like something creative. It could even involve something spiritual, like maybe like something like teaching something spiritual or being a part of some kind of like spiritual understanding, like, sharing that with people, or even like religious teachings, stuff like that, or healing, something that brings healing to people, like something for the community or society, or helping people that, might not have a voice, that are maybe overlooked in society. So because Neptune is a generational planet, you can look at its ruler. So if it's like in Capricorn or Aquarius, look at what Saturn is doing. You can look at Uranus too, but Uranus might be like in Aquarius too if you have a Neptune in Aquarius. So look at what Saturn is doing, because that's going to show you what that work is that you need to actually be working on in the real world, like in the material world, the growth, the progress, the work that you need to be doing that will help you with Neptune, that will help you integrate Neptune into the midheaven. And you can also look at the midheaven ruler too to see what that is doing, and it'll tell you more about what the kind of energy that your midheaven is utilizing, and that can help you work with, that can help your Neptune work with that energy. Now, if Neptune is like in Sagittarius, if you're part of the older, not that y'all are old, but older than me generation, look at what Jupiter. So Neptune in Sagittarius can be a little bit more creative, because Jupiter is, Sagittarius is like the comedian. So look at what Jupiter, that's going to show you more of the creative aspect of your Neptune, and how you can utilize, the ruler of it towards your midheaven. And it could also involve teaching. With Neptune is in Sagittarius, it could involve some more of like the teaching, spiritual side of it. So that's the square. So with the square, you're also going to be faced with the challenge of Neptune square the IC. So I think to get an understanding of it, you might watch the opposition part of this video just to kind of understand what Neptune does when it's connected to the IC. So it's the same thing, except, this is going to be a T square between Neptune and the midheaven and the IC. So Neptune is attempting to balance out how the Neptunian energy fits with the midheaven, which I just explained, and the IC. So it can become confusing because Neptune is, sensitized, or being sensitive to the outer perception and what you actually feel. And it's trying to mold itself to be able to utilize both of those energies in both directions, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like how the MC and the IC are working in your chart. Neptune is going to be kind of the direction that MC and IC opposition in your chart takes. But because it's Neptune, again, it's confusing and it's not clearly understood. So what you feel and what you might think you're supposed to be can be confusing, because you have to direct what you feel into the midheaven to create like a more honest public persona. But if Neptune is directly mixed with those, then it might be more difficult to understand that opposition, the MC-IC opposition, and how you're supposed to kind of utilize who you are, what you know about yourself, what you feel, into what you then become. Because you might be confused on both ends. So, they always say with like a T-square, which if any planet is square your MC, it'll be square your IC too, so they always say with T-squares, look at the opposite end. So if Neptune falls in the 7th, or on this end of the 7th house, the descendant, look to what is in your first house. So that kind of projection of your persona right away, and what that's doing is kind of going to help you get a stable ground with Neptune with other people's projections of you in the 7th. You're going to kind of utilize your initial persona and your physical, persona, what people know or what you project when people first meet you, utilizing that understanding of yourself and your initial perceptions of life and reality, utilizing that to help you kind of draw the line between what people project onto you and, kind of what you know yourself to be as. That can help you work out that T-square between the MC and the IC if Neptune is on the 7th house end. Now, if it's on the opposite end, then you kind of have to utilize maybe the kind of people that you're attracting and what that might say about, your shadow, your 7th house shadow, or what people tell you that they see you as, because it's going to be probably different from what you think that you are. So utilizing that opposite end, the opposite of what you think you are, what you come off as, what you think you come off as, will help you understand yourself with Neptune on the ascendant end of the chart. Will help you get a better understanding of yourself because you're going to be actually incorporating other people's perceptions of you, but make sure they're, people that have your best interests, okay? Don't listen to people who are telling you shitty things about yourself. I mean, unless it's constructive criticism. But you know what I'm talking about, people that are around you that are nice, good people that want to help you, incorporating their perceptions into what you understand about yourself, and that will kind of help you navigate this T-square. So this is just something, it dawned on me that I didn't add this, which is crazy, but this is part of the challenge of having Neptune square the midheaven and the IC. Now I'm going to talk about the opposition between Neptune and the midheaven. So the positive side of Neptune opposite the midheaven, it has more of the sensitivity of Neptune midheaven aspects than even the square, especially if Neptune and the IC, because it'll be conjunct the IC, if they're in the 4th house. Now I'm using, again, like I mentioned for the square, I use the equal house system. So when you use the equal or whole house systems, the MC and the IC don't always fall into the 4th and the 10th houses. But if this one, if Neptune just so happens to fall in the 4th house, because it'll be conjunct the IC, then it's going to be a little bit deeper, or it's going to fall within the realm of the emotions. So that's why it's going to be deeper. Just having it conjunct the IC alone makes it deeply sensitive, but it kind of adds a little bit more to it if it falls in the 4th house, because it's going to be confined within the realm of your emotions, your inner root. So the challenge with Neptune opposite the midheaven is involving your understanding of where you come from, because it's connected to the IC, which I'm kind of tying it with the 4th house, the IC with the 4th house. And that is understanding where you come from and what your emotions are and how they anchor your chart. Because the 4th house and the IC are the foundation of the chart. So when Neptune is mixed in with there, it just kind of becomes unclear. The stability of your chart becomes unclear, and what its energy is derived from becomes foggy and confusing. So that's why it's hard to maintain a solid public persona up at the 10th house, midheaven, because what's anchoring it isn't solid. So your public persona or your role in your career or your ability to even maintain a career or social position becomes shifty. So you can go through life trying on various roles without really knowing yourself and how you even fit into that role. So this one, the square kind of can be a chameleon with the public persona. This one can feel more like you're lying because first of all, you don't even really know who you are in the sense that you don't know like where that public persona is coming from, if that makes sense. Like the inner you versus the outer you, that's like the 10th and the 4th house. But if the inner you isn't clear or solid, then the outer you becomes like, what is it? Basically, like, how is that even me? How do I fit into it? So although there is, just like all Neptune midheaven aspects, there is a lot of creativity, there is a lot of healing abilities that this can have, but all of that can become kind of lost within yourself to where you don't always show it. Now that, because it's an opposition, right, they're trying to balance each other out. So that losing that ability within yourself is like the extreme midheaven end. Like when you're going full force into your midheaven, that it becomes hardened. It becomes like a crystallized version of you that's inflexible. And Neptune is all about adapting to circumstances. So that flexibility, that inner ability to feel all these different things can become kind of lost, so that the outer shell is hardened and it can't really change if you go fully on the midheaven end of the opposition. So on the other end, like the Neptune end with the IC, you can just kind of remain within yourself and be lost in your own fears of coming out of your own shell. This can become lost in addictions or not wanting to take responsibility, daydreaming about success, but not really doing much to go out there and become successful. It's almost like keeping that energy within your own home. So you could be creative in your own home, but it's like that doesn't ever really come out for the public world to see. So in a way, it can almost feel like you don't ever really come out and make something of yourself, is what I'm saying. So it's different from the square, because the square is like adjusting your persona or your interactions with others to integrate Neptune into the midheaven, and even believing that it's possible for you to achieve this future success. But with the opposition, it's the same, but it's using both at the same time rather than integrating it into it. It's using both ends of it. So it's not so much that you have to put Neptune in with the midheaven or the midheaven idea of what you're supposed to be into your dreams, Neptunian dreams. It's more so that both of them are there. They're strongly intact and they're utilizing each other's energy at the same time rather than going to the extreme end. So it's taking the emotional sensitivity with the MC and bringing that accomplished version of yourself at the MC level into the Neptunian IC level to achieve a deeper connection and understanding of yourself, like a more spiritual understanding of what's the inner you, the core of who you are. But it's doing that simultaneously rather than going to the extreme. So that's the opposition. I hope that you found this helpful, and let me know what your experiences are with your Neptune midheaven aspects. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.